Imagine being in a church when suddenly someone starts speaking in a language you've never heard before. Their eyes are closed, their voice rises and falls in patterns that sound almost musical, but the words, if they are words, are completely foreign. This is speaking in tongues, and it's one of the most fascinating and controversial religious phenomena in the world. Today we're diving deep into a question that has puzzled believers and scientists alike. Is speaking in tongues real? Let's start with what happened one morning in Jerusalem around 2,000 years ago. According to the book of Acts, the disciples were gathered when suddenly they began speaking in different languages they had never learned. Witnesses from various countries were amazed to hear their own native tongues being spoken. This event, known as Pentecost, marks the first recorded instance of Christian glossolalia, the technical term for speaking in tongues. But here's something fascinating. This phenomenon isn't unique to Christianity. Throughout history, similar experiences have been reported in various religious traditions. Ancient Greek priestesses would enter trance states and speak in unknown languages. Islamic Sufi mystics have described experiences of ecstatic utterances. Even some Hindu and Buddhist practitioners have reported similar phenomena. Now let's break down what we're actually talking about when we say speaking in tongues. There are actually two distinct types. The first is xenoglossia, speaking in a real existing language you've never learned. This is what allegedly happened at Pentecost. The second is glossolalia, speaking in an unknown language that follows speech-like patterns but isn't a known human language. This is where science enters the picture. Researchers have been studying this phenomenon for decades, and what they've found is fascinating. When scientists hook up electrodes to people speaking in tongues, they notice something remarkable. The frontal lobe, the part of the brain normally active during conscious speech, shows decreased activity. Meanwhile, the emotional centers of the brain light up like a Christmas tree. Dr. Andrew Newberg, a neuroscientist at the University of Pennsylvania, conducted a groundbreaking study using SPECT scans to observe what happens in the brain during glossolalia. His findings suggest that people speaking in tongues are experiencing a genuine neurological phenomenon. They're not faking it, but they're also not exactly speaking a structured language as we understand it. But what does it feel like? Listen to Sarah, a practitioner from Atlanta. It's like a river of words flowing through you that you don't understand, but you feel deeply connected to something greater than yourself. Others describe it as a surrender, a letting go of conscious control over speech. Linguists have made some fascinating observations too. When they analyze recordings of glossolalia, they find that while it's not a structured language, it's not random either. The sounds follow patterns similar to human speech, often incorporating elements from the speaker's native language. It's like the brain is creating speech-like sequences without actually forming words. Here's where things get really interesting. In Pentecostal and charismatic churches, speaking in tongues is often seen as evidence of baptism in the Holy Spirit. But even within Christianity, there's debate. Some denominations view it as essential, others as historic but no longer active, and still others as potentially misleading. The Catholic Church takes a nuanced position. While acknowledging the historical reality of speaking in tongues, they emphasize that it's not a necessary sign of spiritual baptism. Protestant denominations range from full embrace to careful skepticism. Cross-culturally, the phenomenon raises fascinating questions. Anthropologists have documented similar practices in indigenous religions worldwide. In Haiti, Vodou ceremonies sometimes involve participants speaking in unknown languages. In Korean shamanic traditions, practitioners experience what they call spirit speech. Modern psychology offers interesting perspectives too. Some researchers suggest that glossolalia provides psychological benefits similar to meditation or deep prayer. It can reduce stress, increase feelings of peace, and create a sense of transcendence. The fact that it appears across cultures suggests it might tap into something fundamental about human consciousness and religious experience. But what about cases of xenoglossia, speaking in real, unknown languages? While many claims have been made, documented cases that stand up to scientific scrutiny are extremely rare. Most instances of speaking in tongues are glossolalia rather than xenoglossia. This brings us to an important point. Asking whether speaking in tongues is real might be the wrong question. It's clearly a real phenomenon. People genuinely experience it, and it has measurable effects on the brain. The deeper question is, what exactly is it? Some scientists suggest it's a learned behavior shaped by cultural and religious expectations. Others view it as a natural manifestation of altered states of consciousness. Religious believers often interpret it as divine intervention or spiritual gift. Perhaps all these perspectives capture different aspects of the truth. What's particularly fascinating is how this phenomenon challenges our understanding of consciousness and language. It exists in a unique space between conscious speech and unconscious expression, between cultural practice and individual experience, between spiritual interpretation and scientific observation. So, is speaking in tongues real? The answer depends on what we mean by real. Is it a supernatural ability to speak unlearned languages? The evidence suggests this is extremely rare if it exists at all. Is it a genuine religious experience that affects both brain and behavior? Absolutely. Is it meaningful to those who practice it? Without question. Perhaps the most honest answer is that speaking in tongues represents something profound about human consciousness and our capacity for transcendent experience. Whether viewed through the lens of neuroscience, psychology, anthropology, or theology, it reminds us that human experience is far richer and more mysterious than we often acknowledge. What do you think? Have you ever witnessed or experienced speaking in tongues? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And if you're interested in more explorations of religion, science, and human experience, don't forget to subscribe to our channel.